Hi, it's Chaplain Kevin. I'm here with you for this month's Wellness Chat. As we talk about adapting to change, I would like to use this opportunity to think about how we use spirituality and religion to help us cope with changes that we face. We've certainly had our fair share of changes this past year, but life always brings to us challenges and changes. So I want us to think about how we normally might cope with those changes, both positively and negatively, and maybe come up with some new ways that you can take from this few minutes together to help you address those changes and stresses. So I'm going to share a few pointers with you on a slideshow. So today we're going to talk about how spirituality and religion create meaning and purpose. I don't, in my life as a Christian, tend to separate those two a lot, but for some people they do. If they don't have a particular faith, they may be very spiritual. For me, and for many of you, your religious beliefs have a strong spiritual element to them. What does soul and spirit mean? How does spirituality and religion help us be healthier? How does it help us heal? How does it help us cope with change? How do grief and forgiveness have anything to do with what we're talking about today? And how do folks like myself, other health professionals, clergy, help be available in dealing with life changes? And how might you set a goal or be more mindful of something that you can do, such as a spiritual practice or discipline, to help you cope with changes in life? So, in thinking about spirituality, religion, and soul, if you look at the chart on the screen, it may be hard to see. We're in the center, and there are many things that we do to take care of ourselves, certainly physically, emotionally, even down to just what we eat and drink, how we exercise, the relationships that we have. But today, we're going to focus on the one that is circled, spirit and soul, and not to diminish the others, but just focusing on this one aspect. That quote that you see in the blue square, you can't have a physical transformation until you have a spiritual transformation, by Cory Booker. Certainly we aren't meeting live to be able to discuss that, but wondering what that stirs in you. What do you think about that? I think that it brings up in my mind how connected our spirit, mind, and body really are. That they're not it's like 3 points on a triangle. If you take away one of the points, you don't have a triangle anymore. The physical transformation has so much to do with how healthy we are, how aware we are spiritually. So what are some examples and definitions? Well, religion really is a body of beliefs shared by a community. It's as simple as that. It's important to think that all of these definitions have some overlap, and that we tend to get pretty sensitive about some of these things at times. That people can be spiritual and not religious. But what gives us a sense of meaning and purpose? Spirituality is directly experiencing what someone believes to be sacred. And soul is just what we think, what makes something or someone alive, our soul. So a person can be spiritual, religious, or soulful at the same time. So spirit and soul, it can include meaning and purpose, what we value, um, seeking well-being, inner freedom, a sense of inner peace, living, flourishing, being resilient when challenges come. Think about a rubber band. You know, you can stretch a rubber band. I don't have one on my desk. And it's going to go back to its original form. It's resilient. But if you keep stretching it too far, if you don't take care of that rubber band, in other words, it's going to break. It's only resilient to an extent. Connect with others with a sense of belonging beyond ourselves. Living in the present moment. I think this is really worth taking note. Being mindfully aware of what's happening in the moment, because certainly we're bombarded with things that have occurred. We can really ruminate on the negatives and things that have happened, painful events, life changes, but being aware of what's occurring in this very moment. So why does all this matter? Well, it matters, one, because we tend to live a little longer. Studies show that if we're spiritual and religious, if we attend services even, we tend to live 23% longer. It helps us cope better, whether we're spiritual or religious or both. We manage things better. Insurance even says that we recover from surgery faster. We get out of the hospital quicker. We deal with stress easier. We can overcome cancer and chronic illnesses better. We manage natural disasters, life changes, moving from one level of care to another. All of those things are easier. A little more on why it matters. We tend to be healthier mentally when we're taking better care of ourselves, or we have good spiritual or religious practices in place. It all just ties together. And if you've ever worked with a mental health practitioner, often they will talk about these things, or you'll notice some of the similarities, particularly on the spiritual side, with meditation. Healthier people tend to do healthier things. They tend to eat well. They don't tend to smoke. They tend to be a little less likely to abuse alcohol, etc. Also, there have been a lot of studies on the benefits of praying. Prayer activates deeper parts of the brain. I'm not going to get into all of those sections, but when we pray, we slow down. We're more mindful. We're not using the amygdala, which is that part that is the fight or flight response. So we're more intentional about reflecting, being mindful, slowing down, prayer, certainly connecting with often a sense of a higher power. Prayer helps us to cope with pain, mood problems. It is interesting now that PET scans and brain scans are available, how they can see the activity in the brain when people are praying or meditating. There was one study that showed Franciscan nuns, while they were praying, how they were less focused on self, because that area of the brain was less active, and how they were more focused when they were praying on how they defined God and a sense of God while they were praying. And as they described, being connected to God. They were less connected to the world, and that part of the brain was actually more active, which is fascinating. That they, their sense of self, which is in a certain area of the brain, sort of was gone away. Mindful awareness, certainly something that you've heard more in the last number of years, is an important piece of self-care. Connecting with things that give us meaning and purpose. Thinking about things that help with that. The sitting quietly and just noting what emotions, sensations, thoughts bubble to the surface. And some of those may initially be negative, and then being aware of what am I going to do about that? What are some positive thoughts? What are things I'm grateful for? Um, Maybe journaling those, taking an opportunity to meditate, to pray, to listen to music, find ways to cope. Not just getting in a frenzy or trying to ignore those thoughts, but being mindful of what those thoughts are. So today, as we move through our talk, we're going to focus on different aspects of spirit and soul and working clockwise through these as we explore each of these, exploring values of meaning and purpose, considering a spiritual practice or discipline for ourselves, thinking about grief and adjusting to changes, looking at forgiveness, working with possibly someone to help us, maybe a support group if we need that, and then making one small change. So as we start, let's think about exploring value and meaning and purpose. Something that gives us a sense of mission. Why do we get up in the morning? Not just for breakfast. What are ways that you take care of yourself? You're aware of those, but how self-aware are you in how you care for yourself, particularly when there's been some change in your life? That change may have been just the experiences we've gone through in this past year with the pandemic. It could be that you've moved from one level of care to another. It could be that you've moved here alone, or that you've lost a spouse or a loved one, that you've felt more isolated, certainly. What are ways that you have found that are important to you in taking care of yourself? Have you ever stopped to think about that? I want you to think about some of these questions. How do you handle difficulty when it occurs? What do you think happens when we die? Do you worry about that? Why is there suffering? These are heavy questions. Are miracles possible? Why is there pain like we've had this past year? How do you decide what is true for you? That's an interesting question. Now, I want us to explore some aspects of spirituality that you may not initially identify with, but some do. Like I said at the beginning, as a Christian, I tend to identify with a specific religious view of spirituality, and that is just how I've always thought about it. But everyone doesn't think like me, thank goodness. So many people do equate spirituality and religion, but that may not sit well for everyone. So there are lots of different ways to think about it, and I want to point out 6 of those. In my mind, as a Christian person, some of these are ways that I have incorporated, certainly, my spiritual views in my Christianity. And you may see that as, yes, I do too. But for other people, they don't have that same view. So I want us to point out and offer a few different perspectives on spirituality, um, and can give us maybe some healthy ways of viewing and dealing with changes in our life. So here we go. One is that religious view that we often, most of us are going to equate. It's a closeness and connection to sacred that we mostly refer to as God, described by a specific religion. 83% of U.S. adults belong to a religious group. 91% believe in God or a universal spirit. Just remember that a religion is a body of beliefs shared by a community. Humanistic spirituality, feeling close and connected to other human beings, feeling love, reflection, service, altruism. Now, as a religious person, I feel this, but some people who are not religious just may feel this by itself. This may be someone who's a healthcare provider, a police officer, a teacher, someone who's in the military might relate to this aspect of spirituality. Nature spirituality, feeling closeness and connection to nature or the environment, feeling the wonder when we go outside and see the woods or our beautiful surroundings in nature, watching a sunrise, just relaxing in the beauty of the world. Now, you might equate that with the nature and beauty that God has created. Someone that might not believe in God just sees this as nature spirituality. So we have to be sensitive to that. Think then again how you might use the appreciation of nature as a way to cope with stress and changes that are occurring in our lives. So that's the connection we're wanting to make here, rather than getting all caught up in, oh my goodness, I can't believe someone thinks this way. So an important focus certainly is that this can help us heal and cope. Experiential spirituality. I think this one's interesting. Things that happen to us that shape our life. It's informed by what we love and do. So it might be, once again, a caregiver. It might be that you really just love hiking and exercising, is that picture. Or that you are just an avid painter or woodworker or craftsman. That your life is certainly influenced by stories. I like this one because it made me think about the bottom picture when we have had the artists and therapists come and work with us in movement, and that none of us are bound by our limitations, even if we might be in a wheelchair or using a walker. That certainly those experiences in life shape us and change us profoundly, but then how do we adapt to that? And as you can see, this lady in the picture, she's moving and dancing in her wheelchair. And she is transform that in a positive way, as this might describe, using experiential spirituality. Others might define a view of the world as cosmos spirituality. Just the bigness of it all. How we're connected to all of creation when we look out into the universe. Thinking about just how big it all is. I think that particularly these types of spirituality really overlap. It can be a lot like nature spirituality, but just in my mind, the difference is that just how the awe and the wonder, and just how big it is, just the immensity of it, is really the difference here. And the picture showing just, when you look up at the stars, and then when you look down at the grains of the sand. Mystery. There's just a lot that we don't understand, isn't there? Even as a Christian, I don't understand a lot, and I accept that as faith. That doesn't make me less. If we have a spiritual mystery, others may be religious, even Christian, and still not fully understand. We accept the mystery. We accept that this is how things work. Perhaps it's not possible to fully grasp or know, and that's just okay. Some people just accept this and are okay with that. Let's consider a spiritual practice or discipline that can help us cope with changes. Initially, before we think about, I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, something that we do that might help us cope with changes. It's important to think about things that we do that aren't so healthy. And most of them are pretty obvious. And we all, this just out of necessity, I kind of got a laugh out of the Amazon truck when I put that on the slide, because I've done it myself. It's so easy to just get on the computer and order things as a negative way of coping. Particularly, we don't even have to pick up a catalog these days and wait. We just get on our computer, our iPad, and in 2 days here it's sitting at our door. And we feel that sort of immediate sense of that dopamine rush. Certainly abusing alcohol, abusing narcotics, prescriptions, things that make us take the edge off a bit. Binging TV, I think, has become a way of coping with changes in a negative way, because we're just avoiding. Isolating more, not just out of the sense of being quarantined and physically okay, but isolating more in other negative ways, just not even talking on the phone, communicating with others, sending cards, just avoiding life, period. Overeating, just maybe out of boredom, but just overeating just as a way to feel our souls. So think about, are you doing any of these things to try to adapt or cope? So what are spiritual disciplines? What are spiritual practices? It's something that you do that really matters to you. It makes a difference. You feel better. It's an activity that certainly brings peace. It brings calm. It helps us focus on the smaller, everyday little things, not those big things that help, that make us feel out of control. And it might be a hobby. It might be a spiritual discipline such as reading your Bible, having devotions. It might be taking that walk on the trails, or going around the lake, or riding your bike. It might be sitting and meditating or praying. There are lots of spiritual practices and spiritual disciplines, but it's something that helps you feel a sense of connection to something more, just not ourselves. Here's some just additional ideas. Carrying an anchor. Now, not a big anchor, but it might be just an anchor is an object that gives you meaning. I mean, it can be anything. A little memento, a photo, a small stone, or wearing a necklace. Something that has meaning or purpose or reminds you of that meaning or purpose. Some people carry something in their pocket. Particularly men might do that. That just takes them back to a particular time in their life. That's an anchor. Also, just stopping to celebrate the positives, so that we're not just focusing on the negatives. Meditating, Bible reading, as I said, prayer, music and art for many of us is so important. Joining a community. Certainly here we live in a community, but being active and participating as we're able to do that even more. Or possibly a spiritual community or a faith community. Or participating altruistically. Being grateful, listing things that we're grateful for each day, being compassionate, living in the moment. That's a challenge. Being mindful and reflective, possibly being part of a support group or a 12-step group if needed. Doing anything that helps us accept and reframe the situation gives us value. Next, thinking about how we work with our grief and adjusting to changes. Grief is certainly more than an emotion. Grief, as we know, goes through various stages that helps us come to a new normal. We never get over grief, but we accept and we adapt and change. Sometimes there's things such as complicated grief, about 7% of the time, where we just get stuck and we need some help. And we recognize that, things just aren't getting better. Maybe I need to get a little help with that. Sometimes we're told that we're stoic. Particularly men tend to think this more, that we shouldn't just, we should just pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and get on with it. And that can really cause a problem in healing. That we shouldn't share our feelings, shouldn't show our feelings certainly, and that it may be important to have some support. We have a grief support group here called Encounter Hope. There's a wonderful caregivers support group here as well. There's a hospice support group. If you feel the need to work on your grief more, you can certainly talk with me individually or ask me about these groups to help you move through what has impacted you. Exploring forgiveness, you may think, well, why is this in here? And I felt it important because I think it relates to how we move beyond possibly grief, but also things that have impacted our ability to overcome change and difficulty in the past. Sometimes we just get stuck in the past, and we can't let go, we can't forgive, and we need to make a choice to move beyond and to work through that process and accept that it takes time. And freeing doesn't mean forgiving doesn't mean that everything is okay, that what might have happened is okay. And also, this is an area where it might be helpful to talk with someone professionally to help work through the difficulty. If you feel like, I just can't stop thinking about this and it's really limiting me from moving forward and having a better quality of life. And then lastly, working possibly with an expert, that if you feel stuck or you feel overwhelmed or you just feel like you're not being your best self, who might be available to help you? Well, certainly I'm here full time as your chaplain to help from many religious or spiritual traditions and perspectives, but also just to sit and talk, to help you feel supported. Certainly with death and dying issues, to help you deal with life changes from illness or suffering. Why is this happening to me? Just anxiety, sometimes spiritual or religious guilt or anxiety. But there are also psychologists and mental health professionals and pastors and rabbis that can help with these issues as well. And if you need help connecting with any of them, ask me, because I don't want anyone to ever feel like they're alone in struggling with changes. And then last, I want to challenge all of us to think about something that we can do to better cope with changes by making one small change. So what might that be? It might be carrying a photo of somebody that's important to you, or reading something that's inspirational. Saying, I'm going to manage my stress in this way today. And it might be that I'm not going to order as much on Amazon this week or today, or I'm going to I'm going to exercise with Caroline today. How am I going to manage my stress? I'm not going to stay up all night watching TV. Accept and reframe the situation. What's a different way of thinking about this, in other words? And this is a biggie. Focus on the things we can control, the things we're not able to control. We all have a tendency to focus on the big picture of what we can't control. Focus on what we can control. So the things that we've talked about today, clarify your beliefs and values. Decide if you want to start a spiritual practice. Some call it a spiritual discipline. Work with grief and change. We all experience those. Forgive if you need to, so that you can move forward. And talk with a chaplain or other professional if you feel like you need to. So start by asking, what gives you a sense of meaning and purpose? What really matters to you? Remember that spirituality and religion are closely tied to your health. There are lots of options. Pick one thing so that you don't feel overwhelmed. Many of you are already doing some of these things. Take it at a pace that works for you. There's no expiration. Your life is your life. Do it in a way that works for you. We have a tendency to compare ourselves to other people, and that's not helpful. And then think about what is one way you can cope better with changes today. The tendency is we sometimes think too far ahead, and then we get overwhelmed and we're like, oh, I can't do this. So just think about one way you can cope better with changes today. And it might be that I'm going to get up and go to bed at the same time each day, or I'm only going to have one glass of wine instead of 3. I don't know, whatever works, to think about you're going to cope better. So I really appreciate your time today. I hope I've offered some helpful ways, maybe some challenges to thinking about some of these things a little differently, that we're all certainly in this together, but that we have some good ways already built into our religious and spiritual mindset to cope with life's changes, and to certainly also appreciate, if we are religious, that there are many spiritual viewpoints that we may not have thought of or that we may not agree, but that we want to appreciate in others and how they cope with these changes as well. I wish you all well. And now I'm going to pass the torch for just a moment for Caroline to offer us an exercise.
This is called a cactus stretch. Of course, sometimes in our classes we call this a goalpost stretch. The benefit of this is that it improves flexibility in the upper body, which improves posture and our balance. You can do this seated or standing. You're going to sit or stand straight, relax your shoulders down, squeeze your shoulder blades together, keep your head in line with your shoulders. We're going to lift both arms up to our sides, elbows bent, fingers pointing towards the ceiling, just like a goalpost. Take a deep breath in, squeeze your shoulder blades together, and exhale as you move your elbows backwards. Keeping your hands in line with your elbows. You should feel a nice stretch across your chest. Hold this stretch for 15 to 20 seconds. We're going to add a cognitive challenge. We're going to count by 3s to 60 or by 7s to 140. You pick the one that you want to do. I'm going to lead you through the exercise 2 more times. We're going to lift our arms up, standing nice and tall. Inhale. Exhale. Push your elbows back. Pull your shoulder blades together. We're going to hold this for 15 to 20 seconds. Keep breathing. And release. Back to center. Inhale. Exhale. Push your elbows back. Shoulder blades together. 3, 6, 9, 12. And you continue. And release. Very good. The handout will be outside the fitness room if you'd like to pick one up. Thank you for joining Kevin and I on this wellness chat. We look forward to seeing you in June for the wellness presentation on brain health. Have a great day.